Hey, my name is Megan and this is Everything Lit, and today I'm going to be talking through my July wrap-up. So in July, I read 11 books, 12 if we count the book that I finished on the second day of August. I'm going to talk about it in this wrap-up, so we're going to say 12. I read 12 books, a lot of 4 stars, but I'm kind of a generous reviewer, and I'll give something 4 stars if I didn't hate it. I am going to talk about these books in the order that I read them. So I had 2 holdovers from June that I didn't finish in that month, and the first one was A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. This is a historical romance featuring a trans heroine, which is very exciting for like queer rep. Despite my relationship with Alexis Hall's other books, I liked this one. I think it was good. So the plot of this is Viola basically is pronounced dead at Waterloo and uses that opportunity to live as herself. And this book has a lot of accepting characters and accepting narratives. So she goes back to her brother and his wife, and they kind of take her in and give her a place in society where she really could have been like outcast and on the fringes and living a hard life, but her family accepts her. And then her best friend from the past is dealing with PTSD, and they end up going to help him and his sister. Like, his sister should have a season and find a husband, and they go to help him. The main conflict is not actually like that she is trans and that he doesn't know her, is sort of taken care of in the first, I want to say 20% of the book, because this is a pretty thick boy. There is a lot of good tension, a lot of good angst. I feel like it was a little too long for what it was. And as much as I liked this book, I gave it 4 stars. Something about Alexis Hall's writing can feel kind of mocking sometimes, and I don't know what it is, if it's her side characters. So in this case, it's not around the main character, it's around the side characters. The side characters feel like they're supposed to be the comedic relief, but it's done in a weird way. Like, it took me a second to get into this book because the first chapter was so like people trying to be clever and witty, but it comes off like mean. I don't know how to explain it. It's especially prevalent in boyfriend material, and if you know, you know, I guess, because I find it hard to explain. Maybe it's just the tone of the writing. Something about it takes me a second to get into, and if that tone keeps up throughout the book, I'm not gonna like it. And as I said, it's mostly centered around the side characters, like Viola's brother and her sister-in-law and Miranda, the Duke, the hero's sister. So the 2 main characters are lovely and have lovely angst, and really you can see their relationship blooming. You can see why they fall in love, why they like each other. The side characters are weird and awkward. So 4 stars for this. The next book that was a holdover from June was Earthly Joys by Philippa Gregory. This is historical fiction, and it is based on a true human. It's based on a true story of John Tredescant, who was a gardener to royalty and high-level advisors in Queen Elizabeth's court, King James and King Charles. So he lived a long life, and this details basically his whole life, but also his relationship with George Villiers, who was the lover of King James I and potentially King Charles, who came after him. I listened to this on audio because, again, thick boy. This is why both of these were holdovers from June. And so I listened to this on audio, and it was an experience. It was long. I think it should have ended probably like it should have ended like here, like 100 pages could have been cut from this. But that's not what it was doing. It was just going through his whole life and telling us about, you know, his relationships with his wife and his masters and his son. And this is a lot about duty and how England really changed between Queen Elizabeth, James, and then Charles. Like, it charts the course of England through this one man who was a gardener and actually introduced a lot of new species of plants and fruits and things to England. I gave this 3 stars because a lot of the Goodreads reviews say like, oh, if you love gardening, then this will be really interesting, and it's a lot about gardening and plants and the seasons and all that stuff, and I don't really care for gardening, so wasn't in love with it, but it was interesting. And I collected a bunch of Philippa Gregory's books, but I haven't read them. And this does have a sequel, but I'm actually gonna unhaul this and the sequel because I don't care anymore. And I have no interest in reading the sequel, which follows his son. So it was okay. If you like gardening and historical fiction, it might be good, but I didn't care for it. And then the next book I read, I was actually on vacation, so I decided to read My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey. I feel like a lot of people have been talking about this, but I don't know if I've seen reviews of people having read it. This is about I think she's like a 3rd grade teacher, or so an elementary school teacher goes on vacation. She rents a house on Cape Cod, I think it is, with her brother, and the house that they rented, they find the owner of it murdered. So it's what is it marketed as? A spicy mystery, and boy, is she spicy. Like, this is Ghost Pepper's level of spice. I really liked it. I gave it 5 stars. I will say the sex scenes could be a bit much. They were like a lot, and they were very spicy, very graphic, but if you're into it, you're into it. The mystery was good. The mystery was solid. The plot was solid. I liked the tension. Every time the 2 main characters try to kiss, something happens in the mystery and they get cock-blocked, which is pretty funny. So I think it was good. It was sweet. The character growth, you know, made sense throughout, and I liked it. So the next book I read, I don't have a physical copy of because I listened to the audiobook, and that was 10 Big Ones by Janet Ivanovich. And if I can figure out how to edit, I might put a picture of it over here. But 10 Big Ones is the 10th book in the Stephanie Plum series. And what's funny is I read the first book in this series like 10 years ago. I was like 21, didn't really care for it, didn't like, you know, how zany it was. And then I read the second book like 2 years ago and was like, oh my God, this is hilarious. Because now that I'm 30, I'm like, yeah, 30-year-olds don't have their shit together and no one knows what's happening. This is amazing. So now I'm on the 10th, and do I remember what happened in this? Not much, but that's the thing. I listen to these Stephanie Plum books while I'm at work, and they're usually like 8 to 9 hour audiobooks. They're zany, they're funny, they're fast. I don't have to put my whole like being into comprehending the narrator. I think that Stephanie, the main character, tangles with a gang. I think that's the like overarching plot of this book. It's considered a cozy mystery ? But I think it's just like a mystery comedy. I don't know. It's a mystery. That's what it would be shelved as. So that's what we're gonna say it is. I gave it 4 stars. It was a good time. I like Stephanie Plum. I like the dynamics between her and Ranger and Joe Morelli, which are like her 2 love interests. Grandma Mazur is always hilarious. Like, I have grown up and now I'm into this series. And I also listened to Visions of Sugar Plums, which is like a novella set in the same universe. I didn't like that one as much. I gave it 3 stars. It was Christmas themed. Basically, some like entity, some hot guy appears to Stephanie and says he's a Christmas spirit or something. I don't even remember. It was like a 3-hour audiobook. I listened to it on 2 times speed. It was okay. So after those 2 Stephanie Plum books, I read The Candy House by Jennifer Egan. This is her newest book. It came out in April. And this is, it is considered literary fiction, I believe. And it is set in the same universe as A Visit from the Goon Squad, which you can see, you know, it's right on the cover. That's her big Pulitzer Prize winning book. And I think that this had interesting commentary on like privacy and loneliness and like the collective unconscious and memories, and just like life in general. This is one of those books where there are different ways that it is told. So this is like second person. It's like a guide, and then there is a whole section that is emails. So it's told in an interesting way. There are like normal portions if you don't like the experimental stuff, but I think one of the issues with this book is because it's set in the same world. It says it is a sibling, not necessarily a sequel, but a sibling novel to A Visit from the Goon Squad. Anyone who has read Goon Squad is going to compare the two. And I think if you're comparing the two, The Candy House comes up short, because I haven't reread Goon Squad yet, but I think that there was more emotional weight in Goon Squad. I think the characters had higher stakes in Goon Squad. So when everything comes together in the end, I just remember reading A Visit from the Goon Squad, and like I think I cried, and at the end everything comes together so perfectly and so emotionally that you just like, you feel it, you remember that feeling. The Candy House came close to that. The second to last chapter really like came together, made me feel something. Like we're following several different characters and several different points of view, and they're all like vaguely related, like they were childhood friends or their cousins, or you know, so and so married someone else's brother, so they are connected, and you see all these connections, and then they come together in this moment that feels almost like Goon Squad. And then the very last chapter is about a different character and didn't add anything for me, didn't make me feel like that should have been the last chapter. I feel like it should have ended sooner. But I did give this 4 stars. I did really like it. I thought it was told interestingly, but it fell short of Goon Squad, which I gave 5 stars, I'm pretty sure. I plan to reread Goon Squad at some point, but I don't know if I would reread this. Alright, so then the next book I read was Luckiest Girl Alive by Jessica Knoll, and this is a thriller. A lot of people are comparing it, or have been comparing it, to Gone Girl, but I think that does both books a disservice, because this isn't Gone Girl. And most of the reviews, so this came out in 2015, so most of the reviews that I saw online that were like upset or didn't like it or low stars were saying, oh, it was supposed to be Gone Girl, but Gone Girl's better. And I'm gonna let you in on a secret. I have not read Gone Girl, so maybe that's why I enjoyed this. But to me, I know the plot of Gone Girl, and this isn't that. So in Luckiest Girl Alive, we follow Ani Finelli, and she is currently a writer at something like Cosmopolitan. It's called the Women's Magazine, and she is, in the present time, she is getting married to some blue blood guy, and the wedding is going to be this big, huge affair, and there's a lot of like calorie counting and needing to lose weight and just like absolute fat phobia throughout. I think why people were comparing this to Gone Girl is because the main character's like narrative, it's a very like voicey novel. She's kind of a bitch in her head and to other people. So her voice is really interesting and snarky and dark. And I think that's interesting. We get to see what happened in the past that made her so like defensive and so closed off because she was bullied in high school, and then while she was bullied she made friends with this other kid who was a little unhinged, and there are like a lot of bad things happen in this book, so like trigger warnings for sexual assault, and if you have any interest in this book, definitely like look up the content warnings before you go into it, because it is pretty dark. It's a dark thriller. I actually liked it. I think that I've seen some people critique this as like, well, the main character like wasn't even involved in like the big bad thing that happens, and like she's just a side character in the story and blah blah blah. But I think it was good. I think it was well done. I think it was interesting. I think if you're comparing it to Gone Girl, you will probably be dissatisfied with this, but if you go into it knowing that it is just a dark thriller with doing its own thing, then you'll like it, maybe, if you like that sort of thing. So I gave this 4 stars. I also do plan to read Gone Girl at some point. The next book I read was No Good Deed by Goldie Moldavsky. Apparently I read a lot of books that came out in like 2016 this month, but this is a YA contemporary about Gregor Maravilla, who goes to a summer camp for like budding activists. It's called Camp Save the World, and everyone got chosen because they have like a cause that they are championing, and they want to like learn how to be good activists and change the world. And also at this camp is this movie star named Ashley Woodfolk. I think that's her last name. But Ashley, Gregor is like the only person who's not impressed that she's there. He doesn't care that she's famous. He thinks that, you know, people who got into this camp got in on the merit of their essays and their hard work and their like the cause that they were supporting. And very quickly things go absolutely tits up. It's very funny. It's a satire on like activism, but it's very kind, if a satire can be kind. It more makes fun of like the conceit of thinking that you can change the world, but it also sort of gives you a roadmap as to how one person can change the world, or can do good. It like toes the line between completely ridiculous and like kind of uplifting. I don't know how she does it, but it was funny. I think I laughed out loud at some points. There is a romance, because why not? It's a YA contemporary, and I think the romance was done well. It was super sweet. It was a good book. It was really good. I love this author. I can't wait to read her other stuff. Kill the Boy Band back here. That was her first book. This is her second. So I gave No Good Deed 5 stars, and then I read The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. This is actually my first Ruth Ware. I really enjoyed it. It was very spooky. I would read it at night and be like, can I go to sleep now? I don't know. So this is about the main character who becomes a governess. That's not the right word. A nanny. She becomes a nanny for this family in Scotland, and their house is super high tech, but also super old. It was like redone because they're architects, and it has a lot of like spooky moments. It's very emblematic. It's not the right word. It's very emblematic of gothic horror. It might even be considered a gothic horror, but it's also sort of a thriller. And basically it starts out, the main character is writing a letter to a lawyer so that he can represent her in this trial because a child has died, and she is to blame. She is being the one blamed for it because she was the nanny and she was in charge of them. Really liked it. Like, I plan to read another Ruth Ware. If anyone watches this, what Ruth Ware should I read after this? I'm thinking the next one I want to read is The Death of Mrs. Westaway. At the end of this, there were a lot of twists that I should have seen coming but didn't. I kind of had an idea about one or two, but not all of them, which is, I think, really well done. A writer is doing their job correctly if you can see some things coming, because that means the foreshadowing was there, or even if you can't see them coming, but when they happen, they make sense. Like, that's how it's supposed to be done, right? It shouldn't just be a complete blind side. There should be red flags. So there were a lot of red flags. Gave this 5 stars. It was bomb. I want to read another Ruth Ware book, so if you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments. And that, we're getting there. I read Beautiful World, Where Are You? I don't have a physical copy. I listened to the audiobook of this, and Beautiful World, Where Are You is a contemporary, it might be considered literary fiction. It is by Sally Rooney. I listened to the audiobook, as I said, and the Irish narrator was chef's kiss. So good. I love an Irish accent. Beautiful World, Where Are You is about, we follow essentially 2 best friends and then their like love interests, essentially. So one, whose name I cannot remember, is a writer, and she is sort of holidaying in this small coastal town. And then the other friend is a copy editor in Dublin. And the copy editor it charts her relationship with a longtime family friend and how they sort of come together. And then the writer meets a new guy on Tinder, and it sort of details their relationship and how they grow closer. And it was interesting. It was an interesting book. I didn't love it. I think it was kind of frustrating at times because like the characters just didn't communicate, and that drove me bonkers. A character would say something that was fairly straightforward and the other character would just completely misinterpret it. And I was like, are you kidding me? And basically the rating hinged on how the book ended, because if stuff went down stupidly, that was going to be like a 2-star. Like, I'm not doing it. But it did end up well. I did like how it ended. Each chapter like follows one character, and then in between the chapters there were emails that the girls were sending back and forth, and the emails were about like social commentary and the economy and history, and the emails were really interesting. And I would have preferred a book just about these 2 female characters like talking about intelligent, interesting things, that like how to live in our current world and society. In Beautiful World, Where Are You, I didn't like the lack of communication between the characters, and there was something about how they related to each other that just didn't jive with me. And then finally, the like big blow up, like dramatic scene where, you know, all the miscommunications do eventually get solved, like spoiler alert ? But the way that scene happened was, I don't want to say over dramatic, but I felt it was kind of over dramatic and ridiculous, and I didn't like it. I was like sitting at my desk, rolling my eyes, like huffing, being like, this is so stupid. Like, things up to that point had been good, but then the big blow up happened, and I was like, these characters are freaking children. Just talk about your feelings. Like, I know that's like Ireland and England's thing, especially Ireland, like especially Catholic Ireland. Like, you don't talk about your feelings, you don't have feelings, you just get on with life. And I can say these things because my last name's McLaughlin, right? But there was something about this book that just, I don't think I will read another Sally Rooney, or at least I won't go back to her other books. I may read some of her books in the future if they're interesting, but Beautiful World, Where Are You is about it. I gave it a 3.5 stars, and in Goodreads I bumped it up to 4 just for the audiobook narration, but I did not love it. And then after Beautiful World, Where Are You?, I listened to the audiobook for 11 on Top, which is by Janet Ivanovich, and that is the 11th in the Stephanie Plum series. So it's a mystery. It was very fun. It involved, I don't even remember, I think Stephanie is trying to get out of the bounty hunter business. She was trying to find a different job, and just things kept going wrong for her. Things exploding, someone was after her, all kinds of crazy shenanigans. And then she does get a job that still puts her bounty hunter adjacent. It was really fun. I liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I'm pretty typically give the Janet Ivanovich books 4 stars unless I just did not like it. So 11 on Top was good. I will probably listen to 12 Sharp at some point in August because that's the 12th book. Not much to say about Stephanie Plum. She's funny. I like her. That's it. The final book that I read that I finished in August was The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. And I'm very upset, actually, at this book. So I read most of it physically. I did listen to the audiobook a little bit. Audiobook was fine. So I thought that this would be like my catnip. I love ghosts, right? I love writers. I am a writer. I love this author. It's been compared to Pushing Daisies, which I watched, I think, the first season of, really enjoyed. It's been compared to 6 Feet Under, which my mom loved, about a family who runs a funeral home. Like, there were so many things about this book that made it like I could have loved it. This could have been a new favorite, but it was not. I love Ashley Poston, one of my favorite authors, and this book is about Florence, who is a ghostwriter for a famous like romance author. There's a lot of like comparisons to Nora Roberts, so it's like that level of romance author. This girl ghostwrites for her. She gets a new editor. He's smoking hot, and he is the love interest. And like, the issue with this book is that so much is going on. Okay, so let's talk this through. 1, Florence can see ghosts. Cool. She's a ghost writer, and her book is due on deadline. Like, when she meets her editor, the book is due tomorrow, and she doesn't have it done. The third thing, she was broken up with recently. Actually, not recently, like a year ago, and she hasn't been able to write romance since that breakup. 4th thing, her boyfriend, who she broke up with, stole her stories. Like, she told him her life story as fiction because she can see ghosts, and that's like weird and quirky. And he like stole it and wrote like a gothic novel with all her memories. Okay, so that's the 4th thing happening in this. And then, 5th thing, her father dies, sending her home to her small town to make up with her family that she hasn't seen in years. She hasn't been back to her hometown in 10 years. She has seen her family. They come to her. But she hasn't been back to her hometown in 10 years. So that's 5 things that are happening just right off the bat to set up the story. So 6, her family runs a funeral home, and they're like quirky, and there's like an element of like, in this small town, like, you want to be buried by a Day because the Day family has special magic or whatever, because her dad could see ghosts too. Am I right? So all this is happening, and then her editor, like, she starts seeing the ghost of her editor, meaning he died. So that's 7 things. And she can see the ghost of her editor, and she thinks that it's because she needs to turn in her story. He thinks that it's because she needs help with romance. So then there's like a romance plot line. That is 8 things happening in a 345 page book. And I do not think that those 8 things are well balanced. I think that so the character needs to like learn to trust again, and learn to find romance again, and like see the beauty in the world and the romance in life. And the things that happen that lead to her character growth felt like they didn't make sense to me. I don't know how to explain it, and I thought maybe part of it was the audiobook, but I don't think it was. I think this book just, I think it was trying to accomplish so many things and didn't know how to do it right. Like this thing needs to happen, or Florence needs to like think or feel this thing in order for, you know, the romance plot line to move forward. So she would think or feel that thing so that this could happen, but then this thing happens and something else happens that like doesn't make sense, or like the thing that made her think what she needed to think to get to point A didn't correlate. I don't know. Like, I just, it makes me so sad that I didn't like this, but I genuinely was like rolling my eyes toward the end of this. Like, it was so not even unbelievable, because she can see ghosts. There's a level of like unreality that should suspend my disbelief, but the romance, I didn't see how they connected or why they got along. It was just a mess. It was just a mess, and it makes me so sad because I love this author. She's getting a bunch of hype for this book, which, like, good for her. I hope it does really well. I hope a lot of other people like it, but I just did not. I just didn't. It was supposed to be a romance, and it wanted to be a romance, but it just didn't know how to be. I don't understand it. Cause like when she meets the editor guy, she's like, oh no, he's hot. And like, yeah, I get that, but like it has to, like when a character says things like that, you have to make it, like make the character make sense. Make it make sense. So yeah, that was the last book I read for July. Ended on a down note. If you love this book, I'm so happy for you. I'm so glad, but I just am very sad about it. All right, and that was my July wrap up. I read 12 books. Oh, I didn't tell you my star rating. I gave this 3 stars because I'm nice. Even though I did not like it, I gave it 3 stars. Because 2 stars just seems too low. That seems too mean. All right, well, that was my July wrap up. Thanks for watching. If you want to see what I'm reading in August, or, you know, talk to me in the comments or whatever, subscribe, do all the stuff, and I'll see you next time. Bye.